What do you think, Jordan? What's the best way to do this?
I think it might be just worth watching it on the little screen.
Okay, I'm gonna. Yeah. Like that is
better
tiny.
To start it.
If I put that big, do that. Can you see?
Because on my screen, currently, it is the same size as you are.
Okay, but basically, the people can only see the screen. Is that okay? They won't see our faces, but they will hear our voices.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, well then you go. Then they can really experience the film in its totality,
as it was intended.
Yeah, there's no running away from this, essentially. Okay.
So be it.
So, do you want me to give you a bit of a recap about what the film is? I don't know if you looked into it.
Let's start the film and then we'll start discussing, because I think we'll have lots of time.
It's currently running. Can you not see it?
Oh. Yep.
It was not a lot to see, I will admit.
Not a lot to see. I kind of assumed that was the still of the film. I didn't realise.
No, it's the film. It's going. Yeah. So yeah, do you want me to give you a recap of what we're watching?
Helen, what do you see?
Ooh.
Oh, yep, she can see the picture. So the film is going. Sorry. So yes, tell us a bit more about the
You've gone incredibly low, but that's okay. So, yes, I can tell you about the film. So the film is directed by Michael Snow, who I believe did a few different experimental films similar to this one, but this is the one he's most famous for. It was directed in 1967, and we can talk about the time period later on. Like, I think it's important to put it in its right context as well, but we'll do that in a minute. But the basic principle of the film is that it's it's basically just a 45-minute shot of a camera slowly zooming into a window with a wavelength, like a high frequency wavelength in the background. Oh, something's happening, Jordan. Can you see it?
I can. What is that?
There's two ladies have just walked in.
Okay, so it's not just. So I was imagining we would literally just get a slow zoom into the window with nothing happening in the foreground.
Yeah. So it is and it isn't. So that's kind of the whole point of the film. The idea is that stuff does happen in the film, but it's not necessarily always in shot. And that's part of the mystique of it, and the interest of it. So the film itself, again, there's not a lot of plot, so don't expect a lot to happen. There are some things that occur, but the camera just relentlessly keeps on zooming towards that window, and therefore sometimes you miss the action around it as well, which is part of the process of the film.
Does it give you a... do you have an idea of like frame rate and how... Because a zoom like that towards a window over a 45-minute period seems like... I don't know... on a practical level, I can't work out how that could happen without it. How, assuming it doesn't stop, how it could zoom, but at such a speed that we don't...
So I think there's a bit of camera trickery in it. If you notice, every now and then the screen flickers. There's kind of how can I say, disturbances in the film, and I think that's a sign of where they switch from one camera to the next. So although it's presented as one shot, it's not necessarily one take.
I see.
Yeah. So there's a bit of camera.
So very much like with Birdman, like with 1917. It creates the illusion that it's being done in a single shot.
Yeah.
But it's actually slightly, it's manipulating what.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe what I thought I could do is I could give you a bit of context of how this film happened. Also because the ladies have now left and I don't think anything happens for about 10 minutes.
All right.
So we've got plenty of time to chat.
While they were there. It was nice to see them while they were there.
Yeah, they played a bit of Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles, by the way. That's something in the background you maybe heard.
I did wonder, because I was thinking that this would just be consistent noise, but I was going to actually ask about that next. But yes, okay. So
yeah, no, there is also some background noise of stuff happening, but and at the end you'll see that's kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, no, like that's something that I should warn people about. Actually, is that the soundtrack to this film is basically. What would you call it? Like it's basically just a note playing from 50 cycles per second all the way to 12,000 cycles per second. So the frequency gets higher and higher and higher. And last time I watched this, I had to put the volume down, and I will put the volume down if it becomes unbearable. But it does become really high pitched, and it can be quite irritating. So that's just the way the film is. Just be prepared for a bit of uncomfortableness from that as well.
Is it again? It's interesting because I suppose it sort of makes me question. We've had this conversation off mic many times before about what the point of an experimental film like this, what this service is to the art of filmmaking. Now, I suppose in some respects, I'm quite conventional in terms of I want filmmakers to experiment with film, but I want them to do it in a safe way that's familiar to me. Yeah. And what this is doing is it's basically completely stripping away any pretext of cinema. Yeah. If you consider film and cinema as two separate entities, cinema is something we go to see, the love story or it's a terrible micro. Apparently this film is Melting My Brain, or Psycho, or 1917. And film is the actual formation of filmmaking. That is, someone who has a camera, has audio equipment, and they can do anything with it. Yeah. Treating those two things as separate entities, there are lots of filmmakers who experiment with film inside cinema, but you don't often get film. If you treat it more like a Venn diagram, this is the furthest away from. This has the most minimal concept of cinema in existence, because again, it's nothing. It is there's no structure that I would identify as cinema.
Yeah. So you have to kind of put this into context, and that's what I was trying to do. Is Wavelength came out in 1967. So the 60s were like a very important phase for cinema. That's when you have the French New Wave. Late 50s, early 60s, that's like the French New Wave. And the French New Wave is all about experimentation. It's about testing things out, pushing the limits, trying something new. And it's very meta. It's kind of, it points out a lot of time that it's a film. It points out that that you're watching something that is fake and artificial. And so that was like the early 60s. You have people like Jean-Luc Godard and Truffaut and all these people who are really trying new and crazy things, some of which have persisted till today, and some which are just lost in time and obviously have not made it because it's not very good. But you basically have that movement, and then you have it kind of goes out of France, because it starts off in France obviously and goes in different places. And Wavelength, I'm assuming I think it's US and Canada, so it's kind of the US area. So just before Wavelength, you have the New York Underground movement as well, like for 3-4 years, where there are all these extremely experimental films. They've stripped the narrative completely out, and they're just trying crazy things, really outlandish things, trying to really be like, cinema is important. You have to watch this. This is important. It's not just about people dancing and happy things. It's like, no, this is an art form, and we need to treat it as an art form. So Wavelength kind of comes in at that stage, and it's like, yes, I'm going to make a film which is devoid of, it's not devoid of a narrative, but it's not presented in a way that you would traditionally associate with films. It's intentionally using weird angles, weird shots, and stuff that is jarring for the viewer, in a way to kind of emphasize the fact that there is a film process. It's trying to tell you that films are an art form as well, and they have conventions and stuff that can be broken and should be broken and experimented with. It's kind of bringing it to an extreme. You shouldn't have to do things these crazy in order to make a mark in film history, but it's telling you to try out different things and experiment with different things and see what works, essentially.
I see what you're saying,
yeah.
But I suppose it becomes that question of, it's the barrier between film as an art with a capital A and film as a commerce. Yeah. In terms of, people go to the cinema to pay money to be told stories that they relate to or learn from. What's the phrase? Educate and entertain. Yeah. And so I suppose it becomes a question of, this is very much a film, the film style that's made for the filmmaker, but it's not a film style made for the for the audience, because it becomes that question of, okay, so you've paid £5, you've gone in and you're watching Wavelength, say. Yeah. And it then becomes a question of, okay, what would be the aim of this as a viewer? What am I supposed to be taking away as I'm watching this transpire? What's the function? What is the artist trying to convey to me, the observer?
So I mean, first of all, you wouldn't watch this for entertainment value. You wouldn't watch this for fun. You would only really watch this film or films like it if you have an interest in film and are interested in techniques or art, I guess, if you're interested in modern art. So you're definitely not taking away enjoyment necessarily. I think what it's trying to teach you is the role of the camera within film, and how placing different shots and placing different angles can really emphasize or reduce certain aspects of the action. It's something actually I've written in my thesis, completely unrelated to film, but it's about like the objectivity of the camera, because we think that a camera is completely objective. You think, oh, if you take a photo of something, you're taking a photo of how that thing is, and you're not thinking about how you think that's an objective representation of that object at that time. But actually, when you're taking the photo, you're choosing the position, you're choosing the angle, you're choosing the lighting, you're choosing there's all kinds of conventions and things you add in and subjectively to that image to convey your own sensations and feelings through that photo. And I think it's the same with film. In this one, it's saying, we can have like all these actions in shot, and we could have all these events happening in front of us, but we're choosing deliberately not to, because that's a creative choice we've made, and it changes completely how you perceive the film. So I think it's making you think about how the input of a director influences that film.
I see.
Does that make sense?
It does. I see the logic behind that, which like as you say, the role therefore is to. Yeah. Again, like you say, it's more relevant to an art piece than it is to a. Definitely is. To a cinema piece in that respect, in terms of, you go to a gallery and observe a film like this in the same way that you would observe a piece of art. Yeah. Oh, shall we check in with the film just to see how it's going? I've just had producer Helen come in to tell me that are we okay to see it so far? Where are we at?
So we're kind of it's zoomed in a bit, obviously. We've kind of lost track of the stuff that's that was in the foreground originally. So we're getting closer to the window. Admittedly, nothing has happened in the last 10 minutes or so. It's just constantly zooming in. There's obviously cars passing outside, but you can't see them more than a glimpse of them. But yeah.
Okay.
I think
so. In terms of sort of just to slip into technical side of things. Yeah. As in terms of YouTube, are we? So right now, the audience can only see what's going on in the film. They can't see us.
Yes, but they should be able to hear us. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's not what producer Helen can see, then we have issues. But hopefully that is exactly what's on the screen.
Because she said that there might have been an issue with the showing of it, but I can't. Obviously, it's hard to sort of navigate because, of course, being on and then also observing is quite difficult. It becomes challenging to both watch the film and also.
If it looks like a still image,
what's that?
That is fine. I think that's background noises. I think that's part of it. Oh, something's happening. So the other thing to do with this film, and do stop me if there's a problem with the stream, but I'll keep on going if there isn't. But the other thing that it's trying to do and is to emphasize the narrative. So the little elements of narrative that there are vastly emphasized by the fact that there's nothing else happening. Because you got like 10 minutes of nothing happening. When eventually something minor like that noise happens, you're like, oh wait, what's that? I really want to know. It emphasizes that mystery and intrigue of like, I've been bored for the last 10 minutes. Now there's something happening, and it's something mundane, but I want to know more about it.
Well, in terms of that, there's almost like a what do you call it, a psychological test in that respect.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, someone's just walked in and died.
Huh.
And their dead body is on the floor.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, presumably they died. They've collapsed. It's obviously not clear.
But let's assume they've died. You see, I understand what you're saying, which is this with this kind of thing, where the idea that someone just collapses and dies is quite odd. It's quite a, unusual thing to observe.
Mm-hmm. But there's two things.
And all of a sudden, it becomes much more emphasised by the fact that we are watching.
Yeah. And there's also like you're thinking like, is there anything behind the camera that you could see that would give you a better indication of what's going on? There's you've got a lot of questions, and it's not really answering any of those questions. All you see is a man on the floor, and he's collapsed there. So you're like, okay, something's happened here. What's happened? What's the relationship with the girls that were in before? And it just doesn't explain any of it. So, but it gives you those 10 minutes between one thing happening and the next, where you're there like, well, I'm gonna have to think about it. I've got nothing else to do, so I'm gonna constantly be trying to figure out what's happening until the next small thing happens.
The next thing can happen. Yeah. But it rewires the brain in regard to how, because I've talked about this extensively in other videos about the nature of pattern recognition and the desire for us to find pattern and meaning within anything we observe. And so with something like this is the extreme form of it, where it's the thing where something that is observed, what is it, we assume that everything we need is contained within the narrative because we are being presented the narrative. And so therefore we're assuming that the clues and answers and the meanings behind all of it will be contained within the camera. Yeah. And so it's a question of, we just need to contextualize our understanding of that.
Yeah. It's again, like that's why I enjoy it as a concept. Again, I don't necessarily enjoy it as a film. It is a long watch, and if you're not talking to someone at the same time, it is quite boring. But it does kind of, it's an important film because it was at a time when there was all this rule breaking, and it's just kind of taking that to an extreme and saying, this is what would happen if we would break every single rule, and put a lot of emphasis on only certain aspects of the film, and it's unwatchable. But I'm sure it definitely gave ideas to people afterwards of how to do this kind of stuff, how to use cameras in an effective way, and how to use things happening in an effective way. You see it like in modern day. I can't think of like a specific example, but whenever you see, for example, whenever something happens off camera in a film, I'm not saying it's directly influenced by this, but it's the same idea. If you have like somebody who dies off camera and all you can hear is the noises of that person dying, for example, that's taking away from the action, and you're there like listening in to try and work out what is happening because you can't see it. So it's emphasizing other senses over just the sight or what you can see through the camera. Can you think of an example? I can't think of a specific example of something happening off camera, but I'm sure there's quite a few.
My immediate go-to is, well, it's not quite right because, but I was thinking of No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
And the conversation between Javier Bardem's character and the wife of the guy he's killed, and then the fact that it cuts, and they're debating about the fact that he's a killer and the morality of it, and what it means, and you know, whether, because he uses chaos as an element of his cruelty, whether somehow that means that he's, what do you call it, devoid of responsibility. However, you then cut to him leaving the house, and it's unclear if he's killed her or not. I remember. Killed her, and so that, I think that. But the problem is, you are given context, so it's not like something's happening off screen. It's simply giving you a void where you would normally be given meaning. So it's not quite correct.
No, it's not quite the same, but it does. I think you're right. Is that kind of
sorry? Just a quick side note. The unbearable aspect of it has started.
I'm going to put the volume down a bit. Yeah. Is that okay, everyone? I hope that's okay, because it is difficult to listen to, and I think we may end up putting the volume completely down. In which case, I'll tell you if any sound effect would have happened. But yeah, it is unbearable to listen to. But yeah, no, I think that's it. I think it's. I mean, again, I know no modern film would do this kind of thing to the extreme that Wavelength does it. Obviously, you know, this is the extreme. This is the worst case scenario. But I do think there is a good lesson to be learned about, you know, when they say like show don't tell, right? That's a big thing they say. You know, you don't want to just narrate something. You want to just show it. If you're going to say this happens and then you got a narrator speaking over it or characters talking about it, there's no point. Just show what's happening and then people will get it by looking at it. But I think there's a value to actually also having the, you know, not show, imply something like that, you know, like where action happens but you're not necessarily privy to that action, so you have to kind of deduce it from clues you have, the limited amount of clues you have in front of you, and it's good for like you know, ambiguous morality characters where you're like, okay, is that character, do we think that character did a bad thing or not, you know, without actually having seen if they've done it or not. It's good to speculate. But I think
Todd Phillips is the Joker, if we're looking at a recent example, really likes to play with that and the idea of what he does and doesn't do, and that sort of veers more into the Hitchcockian sense of reality and the idea of what's happening in his mind and what's not. As part of this series, I would like to go back and watch specifically King of Comedy, which is currently a gap in my observation, and American Psycho, because they both play with the idea of perception, reality, inference, and the line between you know, and this technique seems like the right kind of film. Like you say, the inference of something without it being shown adds a level towards the idea of, okay, we as an audience actually have to work. You know, it's not us being just given everything. We actually have to, you know, apply a certain amount of intuition and observation to what we're, you know. What did I saw something recently where, which film was it? As I've mentioned doing this series, the big problem that I have is that I've got to the point, and I'm sure you're the same, where you watch so many films, it becomes difficult to disseminate what, you know, and you think, which film was it? Because I remember my comment on one of the films where I wish it had ended 10 minutes earlier and it was left ambiguous to the conclusion of it, and unfortunately whatever film that was is not in my mind, but whatever the point, you know, it. You know, I like the idea that audiences leave certain films with a sense of uncertainty.
Yeah, I think that's it. I like films that make you, that really make you work for your own enjoyment. You know, like there's a lot of modern films that they're just passable. I always say they're passable because they just kind of give you the entire story. They present it as plainly as possible. You know, it's really easy. You don't really have to think about it. It's just kind of, you passively assimilate what they're saying, right? But then the difference between those films and films like, you know, Scorsese films or you know, anyone of any kind of caliber is that they do make you work for it. They're not boring and predictable, first of all, but also they use all these techniques to keep you constantly entertained and on your feet. You know, the whole thing of, like, you know, not necessarily showing something, it's creating intrigue, and it's making you think constantly of, like, what's going to happen next? I honestly have no idea. This could go any way because I've not been given the whole picture in front of me already. And I think that's a skill of being able to hold back as much information as possible without being confusing, but also holding enough information that it is interesting that stuff's happening, you know, and makes you think about it a lot. Yeah. But this is the thing, like so the reason why Wavelength is important, like many other films of the past, is that it's not necessarily important in itself. It's the concepts it's putting forward and how those are then utilised by future films to improve their own films. So I think we were talking about Citizen Kane recently, weren't we, about this kind of thing, where when Citizen Kane came out, it was absolutely, there was millions, like there was so many new techniques introduced, so many new concepts and everything. And today it's probably not as, you know, it's not as enjoyable as it was in the past. It's not as, you know, great and innovative as it was then. But we only can say that now because we've moved on from there, and all those techniques have been assimilated within all the films afterwards. Yeah. So it's kind of become boring for us. By the time, it was very controversial and new, and that's the same with Wavelength. At the time, it you know, it was important in its own right. Now we just go, it's a boring film about a shot for 45 minutes towards the window, but actually it's playing with concepts that have then been adopted by a lot of later film directors.
I suppose that's the thing. This is what you might call the filmmaker's film, where filmmakers probably you know, you shouldn't be shown filmmaking by other famous, like if you were a young filmmaker, you know, outside of, if you were being taught, say, you shouldn't be shown something like a Spielberg or a Scorsese or a Hitchcock, because it will be easy to ape them, and just in your normal life you'll encounter those films. If you're going to be taught film, I suppose the logical thing is to be shown films like this, I suppose, to almost go, okay, as a filmmaker, I want you to go away and study. By the way, sorry, so I'll finish my point because I do want to sort of question stuff that's actually happening in the film as well. You know, go away and use techniques that are contained within these kinds of, you know, even if it's only subtly. Because the problem is you end up with people who are trying to do a Scorsese or trying to do a Nolan or trying to do a Kubrick, and it's like, yeah, but what's the point? You know, that's it. It's blatant that you're doing that. It makes more sense to use the styles that are within these raw films, because it's like dough. It's like you're being given the dough, but you can make of it something completely different. Yeah. Sorry. So just to return to the film, that's something else I've noticed. And this will be the demonstration of whether this is actually a issue with the stream or whether it's actually part of the film. Yeah. I'm getting a lot of like lens flare and flashes. Yes. And
no, that's part of it. It's meant to look a bit weathered. I think it's partly to hide again those kind of transitions from one camera to the next. But you know, if we're talking like especially like the New York underground movement, like they used a lot of this kind of effect. It looked very. I think the idea was to make it look even more amateur than it was. And it's kind of being like we're so different from mainstream film that we are completely amateur. We are as plain as it gets, kind of thing, and as controversial as it gets. So I think that's part of that tradition. And it is intentional. By the way, there is now a woman on the scene. I don't know if I put the volume too low. I'm going to put it up a bit to see if this helps. But it may
I can
be
hear
too loud.
yeah. Yep, I can hear like a crackling.
Yeah. So she's come in and she called someone. I think she called an ambulance from my memory. Because obviously there's a guy on the floor who's fainted. Or died.
Oh,
we don't
she's
know.
walked out. She's walked out. She's gone.
Yeah. So you kind of got like a bit of a ghost kind of effect going on there, but I think it's meant to be just a degradation of the film. I don't think that's meant to be a ghost actually. But yeah. So I think we got about 15 minutes left on the film, by the way.
Well, I have to say, I mean,
yeah.
I feel like I've done this wrong, I suppose, on some degree, because if I'm supposed to be watching this as intended, I'm supposed to be watching this in a silent room, observing and listening and hearing the increase of the sound. But frankly, as I say, I'm not as art house as you. I have yet to desire watching a 12-hour Hungarian film on agriculture.
7 hours. I mean, Satan Tango is only 7. Yeah. No, I mean,
that was interesting. It completely went black for a second there. Just for a second. I mean, I know it flashed, went black, and then back to the...
Yeah, it does that. It's just, again, it's that kind of weathered effect.
Yeah, but it's interesting, because you do say, as you said, it's the fact that we become... Oh, it's gone blank again. Oh, and it's back.
Yeah.
You start to really focus on those things.
Yeah.
You start to go, why does it keep cutting away? Does that mean so? You know, like I said, it's pattern recognition. Our brains are trying to find meaning within the smallest of details.
I will say, like, I don't think you need to watch these films like to, you know, I don't think you really need to just like focus on it too much. I think this kind of film, personally, if you're just learning about the history of cinema, it's worth just watching it, you know, in the background, because you kind of get the gist of what's happening and the ideas behind it just by kind of even having it there, just playing, and yeah, but like, I mean, I've watched a lot of films which are not exactly like this, but like have similar kind of ideas, and you just kind of, if you were to just watch it intently, like the Hungarian film for 7 hours, I think you'd go mad. And I think it's good to just have it there, and you kind of assimilate the ideas behind it, and you know, I think that's enough. Personally, I think that's the way to do it.
Well, because I can't understand someone who would just sit and watch this full attention, because it doesn't seem sort of creatively functional. It doesn't seem a point watching this. Just you know, like you know, because there's that thing where if you're in a cinema, you know, when you're watching a cinematic film, you should be giving it 100% of your attention. You should be observing this, you know, every detail. Oh, I see the shadow. We've got.
So the problem is now we've zoomed too far in, so anything that happens you won't be able to see. that's the fun part of the ending. But yeah, I think like if you're like a film student or an art student who's specialising in the, you know, minimalist movement of the 1960s, then sure, you can spend 45 minutes intently looking at this film. But in any other case, I think, like, you know, even just us chatting about it while kind of having it in the background, I think we've still got enough from it to make it a worthwhile watch without having to go insane.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
So I understand the visual of it. The visuals make almost perfect sense to me. That the flashing, the zoom in, the fact that you can only see certain things, and now we're at a point where we really can't.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a bit about the audio? Because of course audio is a passion of mine, and I don't understand the functionality of having the increasingly high-pitched frequency. What's the... Because this, although it's an unusual experience, you can watch, and it's not bothersome to you. But the actual noise, the white noise that becomes increasingly more intense, feels like almost something that's to put you off as a listener. It's actually there to like make it hard for you to observe this.
I mean, I can speculate. Again, I wouldn't say, I'm not specialised in this particular film or this particular genre, so, my guess is as good as anybody else. But if I had to
I will say that you are the only person I've ever met who has a in-depth knowledge of this kind of film.
Oh, okay. Well, I think if I had to put forward a theory, I think it's probably trying to talk about music in film, because usually in a film you have a soundtrack, and in most cases you probably don't even realize there is a soundtrack, because music just kind of plays in the background and you're so used to it being there you don't really notice it. And I think part of this is demonstrating that if that at the beginning you don't even realize there's anything there, but then slowly it becomes more and more obvious that there's this tone at the back that really becomes very jarring. And I think that's part of it, is just saying, like, if you use music in the background, you may you don't notice it at first, but if you really pay attention, that is also a part that works within the film. I'm not entirely sure on what the director meant for it, but I think it's probably making some commentary.
As the viewer. Yeah, that's your interpretation as the viewer, as the that would be your reading of its use.
Yeah. And I guess it also emphasises those small amount of talking there is in the film, which we've kind of missed because we've put the volume down a bit. But I mean, there's not a lot, but there is a tiny bit of it, like the camera is emphasising the visuals. That I think the tone is emphasising the sounds when it happened. But I wouldn't agree.
From your recollection, is there anything important about the dialogue that you?
So I mean, something that we may miss, and I don't know if I don't think it's already happened, because I think it's at the end of the film, but by that point we may have the volume off completely. The only dialogue that happens is at the start they obviously play "Strawberry Fields Forever" by the Beatles on a radio, and then obviously the guy comes in and dies. There's some noise in the background of construction kind of work. I think that's the one you notice, and then there's a woman on the phone who's calling an ambulance, and then at the very last few minutes or so, you can hear an ambulance in the background. So again, it is a story. It's just very minimal, and it's leaving you to think. You have to construct the story yourself around those elements that it provides. Yeah,
interesting.
We need
tell me more about where you are. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah. Sorry?
No, you go first.
Sorry?
Oh, can you... Has the tone gotten that high?
No, unfortunately, your volume in my headphones is very low because of just my microphone.
So, in terms of your experience of art house development, where would you place this in respect of the form? Because obviously this is very well respected in film circles. This is, people talk about this in great esteem in terms of the formation of film and its importance and historical value. But you, having seen significantly more art house fare and seen 7-hour films about Hungarian agriculture or 12-hour films about the Napoleonic War, or
personally, I will say that art house films aren't necessarily my favourite genre, because they're on the list. So I have watched a lot of them, but it's not something that I think is the best form of cinema. As we were saying earlier, it's for a very specific audience, which is film nerds and directors who want to learn about film. And I don't think they have a wider appeal. So I do think it's a very niche kind of genre, and it's not one that I personally appreciate as much. I do think that when you talk about experimental films, you have the extreme ones like Wavelength and Blonde Cobra and all of these underground ones that are quite hard to watch. They're very extreme, and therefore they're very difficult to kind of enjoy. I will say that I personally prefer more traditional experimental films like the French New Wave or the Italian Neorealism, or films that are a bit more mainstream but are definitely trying to push new techniques and new ideas, but within a more traditional kind of wireframe. You know, I don't suppose you've watched any Jean-Luc Godard or Truffaut.
I haven't. No, I will admit, I will put my hands up, and again, this is exposing the areas of weakness in my experience, which is I haven't seen any Truffaut and I haven't seen any Godard.
Yeah, but like I enjoy those because like I'm trying to think of good films. Like I quite enjoy like Pierrot Le Fou. That's like a famous Godard film, or Breathless, I guess. But yeah, like where the narrative is more traditional. It's more, you know, you could have seen that kind of story in the 50s and 40s. Maybe not the 40s, but definitely the 50s. But they're using new techniques and new ideas and new camera angles and new editing techniques and all of this that really is much different from what you traditionally have and has a lot of repercussion. I remember watching Pierre Le Fou, and there's a shot of them driving through a countryside on a car, and it's exactly the same shot you get in Pulp Fiction when Vincent Vega and what's her name were driving in a car. So you can see a very clear imitation of that film in new films. So I think that's more enjoyable. I think if you want to go for experimental films, go for the French New Wave or the New Wave in general. Don't necessarily start off with these. Wavelength is something to build up to. Yeah. Although I guess you watched it now, so you know.
I mean, I'm glad that I have done it, but I'm also glad that I've done it in this manner because, well, it's just a lot better. It's a lot easier. You know, this is a much more palatable. I think if, say, because I am still working my way through your recommendations list, that I will. Unfortunately, I've had to put a pause on for the moment, but I will return to.
Yeah.
You quite mercifully decided to play. You know, to give me some. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say safe choices, but safer. You know, films that are not like this. Yeah. Whereas I think. May not have forgiven you if this had been one of our, you know, if I'd sat and had to watch this, you know, by myself, I think I would not. Our friendship may have been tested at that point. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I think the film is finished, or it's basically finished. Just so you know.
Right.
Yeah, there we go. We've done it. Whoa. Right. Okay, it's going to start a new film now. No, let's stop that.
Then that, so okay.
Let's go back to us, and I will stop sharing that screen.
In which case, I think we should draw this to a very abrupt end.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like again, this is not a film. This is not a film I would recommend to people. We're only watching it because we've joked about it before of being a very extreme film. It's not a film I would recommend, but I would definitely recommend trying stuff which isn't just the usual action film or something like that in the cinema. Try something, even if you don't want to go for a French New Wave, watch an early Scorsese, you know, something that is a bit more interesting and different than just the standard story and the standard angles and the standard script.
Well, I mean, I feel like this has been an appropriate watch considering that it's April 1st.
Yeah.
Wink, wink. It's almost sometimes it's like I have a plan for this series and I actually do things with intention, but no. But I am glad that I've watched this and we actually did do this stream the way that we have, even though technical issues aside, and it's like, you know, this has been a very insightful conversation, and I think it's definitely made it given me a new perspective on it.
Yeah. And to me too, you know, like I watch films and then they kind of sit with me and I think about them a while, but again, it's my own opinion, that's it, and watching it and talking them with you helps me. That's why we talk a lot about films. It helps me kind of think and draw out the ideas that are in my head but I'm not really put into words, so it's very useful.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad we've done this.
Yeah.
So Dr. Robert Barratt.
Tango next?
Yes, sure. Maybe in exactly 1 year's time, maybe.
Okay, I'll keep your word for it.
So be it. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
But thank you for, if there is anyone on the stream, thank you for joining me. But thank you for joining me, Dr. Robert Barratt.
It's a pleasure.
And I'm really, you know, as I say, I'm glad that we watched this.
Yeah. What films have you got coming up on your channel?
Oh no! Don't do this to me, because I've just watched a 45-minute zoom in, so
Yeah.
I no longer know what words are or films are.
Fair enough. I apologise for asking.
But if you do like some of my other films that are more conventional, please do go through my back catalogue of film watching, and please subscribe to the channel. Please like, if you have enjoyed this very strange and surrealist experience, please like the video. And subscribe and click that little bell to get notifications for when new videos are put up. You can follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley. Dr. Robert Barratt, do you have any plugs that you would like to share?
I've got a YouTube channel where I play Minecraft. It's called Rob Plays Minecraft. Why not?
Yeah, I've been observing that, and it's really developed quite nicely. And
Thank you.
give it its due. It is quite like this. It's a very developmental platform, and you're really experimenting, which is very nice. So
Yes.
I do recommend giving that a watch.
Thank you.
And where can they follow you?
Hmm?
Where can they find you on social media?
I think if you search Rob Plays Minecraft, it may pop up. I can give you a link. You can put a link somewhere. Why not?
Right, the link will be in the description below.
Okay, cool, excellent.
Right, well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining me. So, take care. See you again tomorrow.
Excellent. And now I need to stop the stream.